Welcome to the glazing room. So, there's a few guidelines printed on this wall for everyone, and I just wanted to talk about what this means. First, do not glaze greenware. Hopefully you're all becoming aware of different stages of the ceramic process. First, when the clay is wet, you're making stuff, whether it's bone dry or leather hard. If you've made anything, that's greenware until it becomes fired. We don't put glaze on greenware, and we will not fire glazed greenware. It blows up if we put it in a glazed kiln. We first need to bisque fire something. So let me just talk about the differences between greenware and bisqueware. This is bone dry. It's unfired. Listen. It's brittle like chalk. It has no ring to it. And if I put glaze on this and put it on a shelf to be in the glaze firing, it's likely going to blow up because it hasn't been bisque fired yet. Bisqueware usually has like a pink tint to it. You can hear that it rings like a bell. It feels hard, like a soft stone. And this is ready to glaze almost. Glazing in here has a lot of other rules. Well, clean up after yourself. Stir the buckets from the bottom. All these glazes settle down low, so before I put any of the glaze on this, I need to stir the bucket up. Shino first or expect the worst. You don't have to use Shino, but when you do, it needs to go on before you put any other glaze on, or it peels and flakes off. If it flakes, wash it off and start over again. Those are some basic rules. There's a few other things I want to show you though, and before I start to glaze this, I want you all to look at this glazed wall. So, on this wall are all the glazes, and we have those glazes in all of these buckets down here under this table. The buckets are labeled, and so are those tiles on the wall. All of these glazes are cone 10 reduction. And we apply this glaze by dipping and pouring. Here's an RJ Shino. This is what it looks like over the recycle clay. This is what RJ Shino looks like over a white slip. So if I was to put RJ on something like this, it would look like a brighter, creamy, whitish orange on top of this white part, and it would look kind of like a darker, richer orange on this brown part. And where there's a black strip of slip, it might look something like this. Okay? Now, because I'm not going to glaze greenware, something that's bone dry like this, but I am going to put glaze on my bisqueware. So look at this wall and know that there's a lot of options. I could even put things over the RJ Shino. So there's Easy Red or Temoku on top of the RJ. The base is RJ Shino. This whole thing has been dipped in RJ Shino. This corner was dipped in Temoku after the Shino. Remember, Shino first. This corner was dipped in Easy Red. You won't find a tile up here that's got Shino as the second application. The Shino goes on the bottom. But you don't have to ever use Shino. Like, here's Scott's white. This whole tile was dipped in a bucket of Scott's White. After that stabilized, this corner was dipped into the 1, 2, 3, 4 Celadon. Nice. This corner was dipped into the Oribe. And a stripe of black stain wrote all of this. Okay, so that's how you read these tiles. And hopefully you can make your decisions based off what's available up here. And it's totally up to you what you want to do with this. One thing to think about though is like, I gotta clean this up. There's a lot of dust in here. There's even some dry clay stuck to it. And there might be some rough edges or sharp textures. And if there are, you can deal with them now, but the best thing to do is to deal with them when it's bone dry. So there's a lot of chunks and things on here. If I bisque fire this, I'm gonna have a lot of sanding to do with a sanding block to get those sharp edges off. So if for whatever reason your greenware has sharp edges, there's plenty of these little chunks of green scrubbies that easily just take off hard edges, and it doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't even take a lot of pressure, but it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of attention that's going to save you some time after it comes out of the bisque kiln. You know, if there was any work that I needed to do to a piece of bisqueware, it would require like a sanding block and a lot more time and energy. And it's totally not necessary to do this if you take the advantage here at this stage. So now I'm going to go put this on the greenware shelf in the kiln room, because this needs to get bisque fired to become like this. Okay, this one too, I got some chunks. But again, I'm not glazing greenware. I'm just showing you how to prepare for the eventual time when you will glaze this. So, again, I don't want to put glaze on dirty, dusty, fingerprint, black stain, smudge, or sharp edges. Like, I got a sharp edge right here. That'll probably slice you open if there's glaze on it. So I'm just going to take that edge off. Probably should have done this when it was greenware. Okay, so before you put glaze on these, we're gonna need to clean them off. So I go to the sink with a clean sponge. Don't use a dirty sponge. This sponge has been cleaned and wrung out. Like, it's not soaking wet, but it's damp and it's clean. I want to get all the dust, fingerprints, and smudges off of this. And clean this wall inside and out. Look at all that dust. The glaze won't stick to your pots if they're dirty or dusty. So take some time and make sure that you got everything out of there that's in there. And notice how quickly it takes on the water, but notice also how quickly it dries out. That's because my sponge is not soaking wet. I would recommend glazing more than one thing at a time, so having multiple items for yourself, you're gonna have to make 10 of a lot of different things. I'd probably glaze many objects because it's gonna take some time to rinse all these off, stir all your glazes, and if you want to apply more than one glaze to anything, it takes some time in between applications. So, if I want to use this RJ Shino on an ordinary bowl, it's going to look like this over here. This top part is thinner and the bottom part is thicker. So if I want this real thick creamy color, I'll maybe dip it twice. If I want this real orangey color, I'll just dip it one time. So looking into the bucket, notice this bucket has a lot of standing water on the top, and the water is kind of brown. That's the soda ash in there. All the cream is at the bottom. I need to stir it from the bottom to get all the cream whipped up into the water. You don't want to dip pot in water. You gotta stir it up. Much creamier down there. This takes time. It's like wedging your clay. You don't want to use clay if it's got lumps and bumps and wet spots and firm spots. You got to make your clay all the same consistency. Well, same with this. You don't want water on the top and cream on the bottom. You don't want to just give this a couple of stirs. You want to bring all that cream up to the top, and you want to blend that water in with it until it's all the same consistency. Because what we're going for is like a uniform application on the surface. I'm going to rinse this off. It can be done very easily with just a wet sponge when it's wet. If you let that dry on there, it takes a lot of time to clean off. So clean as you go. So if I want to get Shino all over this bowl, I can dip it or pour it. I can just dunk it and submerge it. I think I'm just going to dunk this one and submerge the whole thing. So rather than grabbing on right here and putting it in by hand, we have these tongs that can be helpful. I put these vertical ones inside and these horizontal ones outside. And I won't break my bowl when I'm like that. Another thing I do is I get a damp sponge ready to wipe the foot before the glaze cures. So I'm simply just gonna dip this bowl in here. All the way in, all the way up. I'm gonna hold this upside down over the top of the bucket. Notice it's still wet. If I flipped it right side up right now, all that glaze would roll down to the bottom of my foot. So I'm going to keep it upside down until these drips stabilize. I don't want those running down my pot. Once this becomes stable, then I'll flip it over. So I'm going to wipe the foot until the whole thing is clean. Notice there's glaze inside the foot ring and all the way up to the foot ring. And notice that that foot ring's been beveled and rounded. So when I turn this upside down and set it on the table, the glaze won't be touching the table. Which isn't really critical right now, but it is critical in the kiln, right? So check that out. There's no glaze contacting the surface of the table. That glaze is going to melt and turn to glass in the kiln, so it's important that that glaze not touch the kiln shelf or your pots are going to stick. So you can see that there's a little shine on the rim. This is going to take some time for this glaze to stabilize. I don't want to touch it yet. So while that's setting up for my next step on this, because I want to put a different glaze on top of it, I'm going to come over here and glaze this one. First I'm going to rinse these off because it's really easy right now. Before I start using another glaze, I'm going to put the bucket lid back on the bucket. Because if I want to get into some other glazes, I don't want to drip those other glazes in here. My next glaze is going to be Scots White. All these buckets have labels. Make sure the right lid's on the right bucket. Take your clean stick, stir it up. Still a little thick down here on that stick. Starting to look pretty good. So you can pour glaze on instead of just dipping with tongs. This one I'm actually going to hold right here. Pour glaze into it, pour glaze back in the bucket, and then dip it. But not yet. This glaze is not ready. It's got all sorts of chunks in it. I'm not going to use this glaze right now. Hey Tommy,